Namaste. So, maybe I should come straight to the subject. And the subject here is man, and we can't see man in isolation, but in relation to the world around, his origin, his past, his future. So, there are two ways of approaching this world, including man. One, which I say is a static kind of psychology and sociology, where we fix format things and believe that they would remain just as they are. And this has been at least my problem with psychology, and I put it like this, maybe I'm writing something on it, the unfinished chapter of psychology. So, is man the end? Is our understanding of human beings has already culminated in a complete understanding of all that he is? Certainly not. And the sign is very obvious. The sign is, Sri Aurobindo says it very interestingly, man is an abnormal seeking his own normalcy. So it is one of the most difficult concepts, what is normal with regard to human nature, and that is because we have not really found our normalcy. In fact, our normalcy lies in a supernormalcy. That's to put it paradoxically. Nevertheless, there are three terms of our existence, of human existence. To an extent, we see these terms even in the animal life, but man begins to become aware of these three terms. One, of course, is the individual. We become self-aware. This is something very interesting. Maybe animals are also self-aware. We have no reason to believe they are not. There are certain patterns in at least higher animals where it seems that they have some kind of a rudimentary self-awareness. But certainly in lower animals, it's very difficult to gather, even when we look at them, that there is something like a self-awareness. So we become aware of an individual I, a kind of individuality, if I may say so. And this self-awareness is the first term of our existence. The second term of our existence is the collective. So no man is an island, and we don't live in isolation. And there is in us a need to connect with those of our kind, or with larger groups of mankind, or with humanity as a whole. There is this need in us, and maybe something still beyond, which we'll see as we go by. But these two terms of our existence must be completed by a third. And without this third term, the other two remain incomplete. So that's the paradox. And the third one is the transcendent. So in the language of yoga, we use the word individual, cosmic, and the transcendent. So it is the transcendent which comes in and really gives the real sense to the individual and the cosmic. But that is something which we are yet to explore. And what man has explored so far is largely his surface existence. We see from the yogic point of view. So when we use the word individuality, it is his ego individuality, which is largely a formation of his background, his place of birth, his conditioning through various thoughts and feelings and ways of life, customs, tradition, religion he is born in, and all that he inherits. There is a whole lot of things we inherit. And it shapes our individuality. Of course, we take the struggle, the challenge. Ultimately, what we call as an individual is a product of genes, circumstances, and of course, forces of nature which mold us, shape our personality. And it has taken aeons for nature to evolve this individuality. It's something precious, even though it is something which will be surpassed by something else. And yet, it has its own place, it has its own meaning, its purpose. It has been a great labor, if you look at the past of mankind, to just bring out this individuality. It's a gift, and it should not be immediately annulled. It has to go further. And similarly, with regard to our collective existence, it started with, based on our material existence, so it started with formation of tribes, school, the family, and etc., etc. Things which were in immediate context. And then eventually its highest efflorescence was the nation soul, which we of course spoke about. So nation serves as a kind of intermediary unit between the individual and the larger context of humanity. So, nation is like the second step wherein the individual begins to discover himself through a larger unity and a larger context. And then the third is, of course, the entire sense of humanity, the entire sense of, as one among many. So, this is basically, so far we have done that, and we are still discovering. The nation soul is yet to be discovered. Even the individual has not discovered himself fully. And of course, we don't understand the world existence. So, there are many, many aspects of human life which we are not aware of. And this is where Sri Aurobindo says that we are entering into a new age where this exploration will begin. Up till now, we have explored outer spaces, but obviously, there comes a limit and a term to this exploration. But in the last 100 years, especially in the previous century, we see a new phenomena happening. In the first part of what we can call as the 20th century, from 1901 till almost 1920 or 1910, we see suddenly there is an unleashing of new ideas, which start in the field of physics, in the field of psychology, in the field of human biology. New ideas begin to take shape, ideas which are going to change our existence. And then suddenly there is the stooping out of these forces which destroy many things. Like there is some spoil sport which comes in and starts undoing or using these ideas for very different purposes. So the flying machine was discovered, and along with that the bombers. The atomic energy is discovered, and along with that the atom bomb to destroy the world. So all this process also started. And then right up to 1950, we see that a whole old world is suddenly destroyed. A whole old world order. The social context, for many, many reasons, and we need not go into that. For example, one of the very interesting fallout of the two great wars was that women got voting rights, not because people became very wise. They suddenly realized it is because many men died. So where was the choice? So many women began to take work. They took up work which were not normally given to women. So nature brought out a situation wherein women not only got voting right, they began to work, they began to take a lead, and they began to step out from the boundaries of the home. It was a necessity. And so we see a new evolutionary curve started. Along with that, because many of the social conditions changed, much was destroyed. So human beings started groping that who am I, what is this world? They raised questions because the comfort zones had crumbled, the comfort zones of religions, the comfort zones of family and fixed traditions, and along with that technological advancement, that man began to move freely, began to interact. So a new process started. And that process is where he began to explore the subjective spaces. This is something which he had just taken for granted. I exist, but who am I? He assumed that I am what I am, and he could define that this is my thought, my opinion. Nobody really bothered even to understand what really even ego individuality is. So this is how this process started, and we all know that this exploration into subjective spaces is what is called yoga, because there are two ways we can try to come in contact with reality. One is objectively, we look at this material world, we look at this material body, and we start digging deeper and deeper through the scientific instruments which are designed to study matter. And eventually we go a point where we reach a void. We don't know what's beyond. We just see a dance of energies, and sometimes very chaotic. And the other approach is where we enter into our own subjective spaces, my thoughts, my feelings, my will, my desires, things which are not yet objective, but they ultimately create objective phenomena called as behavior. So psychology also started like that, observing human behavior. It's very unfortunate. This is how it was defined. And even when I was doing MD psychiatry, one of my biggest shock that I received was that psychology is the science of human behavior. So it's starting from this end. It's not about who I am, but I study my behavior, which is a phenomena. So from the phenomena which is apparently tangible, I try to deduce or infer. So all the rest was an inference based on certain kind of data. But who am I remained always unknown and unseen. So when these paradigms of fixed identities, we are all born with certain fixed identities and various, it's a baggage we carry. Whether a baggage of family or religion or society or tradition. So they started breaking down. Nature broke it. So we see that in India, for example, the joint family system crumbled. Otherwise, there was a very strong sense of family identity of an extended family. So nature knew that people are this become a comfort zone. While there are a lot of advantages of a joint family system, but it began to break down. And then you had the nuclear three generation family and now a nuclear family. So now people have begun to explore who they really are because these identities began to crumble, these surface identities. So this is where, really speaking, a new age began to take shape. So in the second half of the previous century, when we see another interesting thing. By 1950, and there is much which is gone, and 50 to 60 we see it's an age when there is a kind of confusion, and the 60s when people are looking for this new identity, looking for new ways of life, experimentation, and looking for larger or different social context, social modes. So there is another kind of, from 60, a new rhythm begins to take place in nature, in the world, and it's still far from incomplete. And this is what Sri Aurobindo begins to reveal to us, what this new rhythm is and where it's going to lead us, and how we can participate in it. So one of the things that he very beautifully he brings out in the human cycle is this story in one of the Upanishad, where there is a background. The story is that the son Bhrigu asks his father Varuna, and he says that, we can put the question either ways, who am I or what is reality? So he says that you meditate and come back and tell me what is reality. So he reflects. Thankfully, it was not like, easy served on platter that you are God and or you are soul or you are this. So he said, you reflect. So he comes back and says, Annam Brahmeti, this matter is real. So he says, okay, good, I don't deny it, but go deeper. So he comes back and says that, well, the prana, that is real. Pranam Brahmeti, the energy, the life energy which moves all things. Life is characterized by movement. So even matter moves. Ultimately, galaxies, stars, universe is moving. So there is a power which is moving it. So that is the reality. Then he says, think again. So what drives this power? So it comes to the mind, and then beyond the mind, the supermind, the Vijnanam Brahmeti, the idea, and that which drives the idea. And then eventually he says Anandam Brahmeti, that it is the delight of existence which is unfolding itself. So human journey at this point stands somewhere, if you look at it, we were exploring matter, and while exploring matter, we entered into the vital domain. Now, Mother speaks about it, that science itself entered into the vital domain. So we started looking for seeds of life. And not only seeds of life, we started wondering, can life be created? So we were looking for that vital domain. The power, it was dealing with, science began to deal with energy, with power. And there we started looking at, even in terms of, the prana, that means all the things which are of vital interest. Science itself entered an age where a lot of, if you look at today's world, there is so much food for desires. Literally, you can, endless satisfaction of desire. The life which was running basically centered around matter and material existence. Many of us have grown up like that. And sometimes we feel that was a beautiful, simple life. We were like Adam and Eve living in paradise. But suddenly, the world has exploded, teeming with desires. And this is the new age. It started with fashion, every time changing. So this is the next level in which we have entered. And along with that, we see human individuality is also beginning to change. So now when initially people asked, what is your identity? It was largely material, meaning thereby, I am my father's son. I am this. Now the individuality is what I feel like, what I wish to do. So it has taken a very different kind of subjective mold. So my identity, my actions, my choices do not derive from the family, do not derive from the society. My choices are my own, whatever that my own is. And normally this my own is my wish. I want to do this, it's my freedom and I'm going to do this. Now there is this newfound freedom which has become a new cult of mankind. We may call it good or bad, but it is necessary. Because no authentic growth can take place without this freedom. And Sri Aurobindo speaks at length about it, that a growing inner freedom is the law of human evolution. And he says that it is true that until he recovers the full spiritual freedom, where alone he is free. By spiritual freedom, it means he unites with the divine will, with the ultimate source. Yet, this freedom, though he will have the policeman, though he will have the external control necessary, and yet he has to move towards a growing inner freedom. Now, this whole map, Sri Aurobindo gives a beautiful road map. Now, then beyond it, we see that then comes the third identification, and this is an age when we see war of ideas and ideologies. It's not that they didn't exist, but if I see the Mahabharata war, it was fought, at least Arjuna thought that we are fighting for a kingdom. We are fighting within family. So there were kingdoms which fought with each other. But in this age, the war is taking place at the ideative level. So there are people who want to preserve an idea which manifests as a way of life, political system, way of life, culture and everything. And there are other ideas. So ideas and ideas are clashing because something else has to come which is still into the beyond, waiting in the passing. This has already begun. And we can see that we have entered into that state of mental subjectivity, wherein the mind, so people often say that, their own opinion and we are what we think. And these ideas have been there earlier, but the mass of mankind has not been really influenced by it. So, but we have begun to assert our own ideas, our own way of life, my own understanding of life. It's not just about my wish, but my own understanding of life. So we see that there are many, we don't use the word philosophy, but there are many new kinds of philosophies which are emerging, which are very individualistic based. And each has its own validity. So this is where we see that we are entering into the stage of mental subjective, which also will be a long journey, and from where we have to take the next leap, which is the real leap, without which even a high intellectuality, we can reach that point, but yet that high intellectuality is yet on unsecure ground. It's an insecure grounds and it can collapse. So Sri Aurobindo gives this example that, well, there have been periods when mankind has tried to climb towards spiritualization, as he calls it, toward that highest reaches through high intellectuality. And there are dangers, and the dangers are that, well, even a high intellectuality, those who started a great idea, now they may be wonderful in terms of even the great idea, but over a period of time, this idea it begins to degenerate. And those who follow, unless there are fresh streams of insight and intuition, those who follow tend to enter into more and more confusion. As Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, their sun thoughts fading, darkened by ignorant minds. And over a period of time, only a shell remains. So this time, this is not what he wants to happen. So therefore, there is the necessity of the individual and the collectively marching together. Because why this idea which starts a great movement, there have been movements like that in the past, and we have spoken about it. There was the Brotherhood of Islam. We don't need to say what it has become. There was the sense of fraternity which was started in Christianity. There was the sense of Vasudev Kutumb started in India. And there was, of course, the Sikh scriptures. We spoke about the service to the world. But what it becomes over a period of time is, because it's not yet on secure grounds. So there is a height to which human beings reach and then they relapse. And then Sri Aurobindo says that how we can prevent it. Something very interesting. How we can prevent it. So it's like it reaches a point like those trapeze artists, or those, that, what is it called? Trampoline. So you will see that, trampoline, though it's a fun thing and people, do it as an exercise. But you constantly climb a little higher, then you come back. And then you climb still higher. And then you come back. Then that momentum with which you are coming back, that pushes you still higher. So we see this kind of a rock and roll going on in humanity. And because of which, when we observe the way the human race has advanced, and there is a reason behind it, and the reason is that there was an age when there were few luminous figures, and the mass of mankind was in the background, and this is going to break, and that's why we see a strong assertion of individuality, this questioning. You question authority. It is the age when authority is gone completely. And the mother says in very, very strong words, he says, you must tell your ego that the age of authority is over. And therefore, there are new challenges. In bringing up children, you can't tell them that, well, because I say so. If you tell a child that I am your parent and I am telling you this, the child will say, okay, but I am telling you this. So children have already entered that space where they want larger space, and they tell their parents that, look here, I need my space, I need my freedom, and it's my life, my choice. I'll do what I want to do. Things which were unheard of in the previous generations, and that has created a very new situation. And this new situation is beginning to throw the seeds of a new kind of education. So, another interesting thing is happening is the age of institutions is over. Whether we like it or not, the fact is, all institutions are just as, it's like a pot in which you plant a sapling. But after a certain point, the sapling is growing at a tremendous pace. That's the story of the king Satyavrat, that the fish grows and it needs a bigger bowl, and the fish grows and it needs a bigger bowl. And finally it goes into the sea from where it has come. So it's a very significant story that to discover the promised land, we have to reclaim our universality. This universality was crammed up in a very small little sense of individuality. I am my little ego. This ego individuality has to open a door through a subjective corridor. We have to pass and eventually touch that key which can help us reclaim our universality. And this is, having reclaimed the universality, then the transit. This is there in that wonderful story of the first avatar, the Matsya avatar, that the fish comes from the sea, goes back into the sea, growing into many bowls, and then it takes a select group of mankind towards a new land, the promised land. So this is what mankind is going through at this point of time. On one side, we see a lot of destruction, the pralaya. No pralaya will be there, as the mother has said, but there will be a large amount of destruction. We cannot help it. And there would be this humanity which is now beginning to discover its individuality. And behind the ego individuality, there is a lot of chipping taking place. The more we are trying to assert the ego, we find it difficult to hold on, because there is another kind of pressure which is mounting on the individual. Individual is trying to break free, and in trying to break free from the society, it stands opposed to society. So it becomes a big challenge. And the challenge is how to integrate this individuality with the need for the larger collective unit. Someone asked me this question today, is there something wrong with me? Why? Because I end up rubbing people on the wrong side, and they don't like it. And I was explaining that, yes, that's what happens, because everybody holds a point of view and an opinion. Now, when you hold a point of view and opinion, it is wonderful if you are living alone in the world. But the moment you encounter a group life, everybody has their opinion, and then there comes a problem. So this is a new phenomena, because earlier your opinion was crushed. There was the society which was a larger group. So individual was treated like a cell in a body. So every cell is its function. Even today, sometimes I see these WhatsApp spiritual movement, you are just a little cell. That is true at one level, but it is not true at another level. Each individual has to reclaim its own divinity, which means a state of near anarchy. So where each individual is completely free within himself, and yet in that freedom he recovers his true unity. It's a very, very wonderful and far off, delightful, and a dangerous dream, because when we go through that phase, we may well enter into a state where there could be a premature anarchy. An individual who discovers his new freedom in something greater, in the infinite. In the ancient time, they have found a way to manage this. So he was a sannyasi. You go live outside the world. You can exercise your newfound freedom, but don't come back, because in the world there is the order. This is what we see in the story of Shiva and Daksh. So Daksh has built a world by a set of rules and regulations. In his world, everybody must follow the norms he has put in place. So Sati is his daughter, but Sati is the divine mother. And Sati wants to reclaim her individuality in Shiva. And Daksh says no, because Shiva has dangerous freedom. Shiva means freedom. What he will wear, how he will walk, what he will do, it's something which is beyond all the norms of Daksh, and he doesn't want to bring him into the yagna. And yet the yagna will be incomplete without Shiva. It's a wonderful story. It presages, envisages a future age where each individual must recover his own fullness. And recovering its fullness, then he must become part of the whole. And then only, truly speaking, it can become part of the whole. So Sri Aurobindo speaks of these changes which are going to come, which means the old ways of holding society together will break down. The age of religions is over, convention is over. Because the age of convention broke down, therefore you had the individual, because it was necessary. Conventions become lifeless symbol. All that I am sure was already dealt with. So because conventions become lifeless symbols, so individual revolts, breaks it down. The Shastra has some defect, so the individual question and breaks it down. And now he is in search of the Shastra within. And is in search of a new way of life. So this is what we see happening today. And obviously this search leads an individual into fantastic domains, dream worlds, imaginations, all kinds of vital phenomena. We saw the drug culture. We saw many things which came up as a result. But humanity is being led through all this. We must have that faith that this is a passage. We can't go back to the old way where society and religion decided the norm. If we do that, then this first term of evolution, individual, that will be gone. And the divine doesn't want it. He has taken upon himself the challenge that I want to become the many. So each individual must recover his own divinity. He cannot do it unless he does it in freedom. Because if it is stifled by all the world around, he cannot do it. So the first thing we have to recover in terms of reclaiming our freedom, and that's where psychology has a great role to play, and its imprint in education in every other field, is to recover our own spiritual self and our psychic being. So it has become a psychology without the soul. That's how I describe it, because the word psyche literally means the soul. It's a Greek word. So in psychology, even, and this is something I'm talking of just 15 years back, there was a big conference on spirituality and all these things. People now talk about it, something nice, at least they are talking. So I asked that all these things we are talking, but can we talk in this academic forum that there is an entity called as soul, and there is something known as the divine whom we can discover. Now this is something which people go into a shell. So I remember the Daksh Prajapati story. You can talk everything, but within this frame, even spirituality must fit into a frame. It's spirituality by its nature breaks the frames. It cannot. You can either be, when we talk about methods, techniques, and nowadays it is entering through back doors of meditation. So meditation has become a technique to give you good health, but that's not spiritual at all. One may be engaged in all kinds of meditation technique, mindful meditation and this meditation, that meditation, and they are nice things. They make us feel good. Feel good factor is important. They give us peace. They make us feel, bit healthy. It's very nice. But that's not spirituality. Spirituality is to discover the soul. Meaning thereby we have to strip ourselves bare of all these surface layers of first the materialistic individuality, that I am what my body is, and the white and black and all kinds of racism based on purely externality. But race and tribe have their own truth, but that's a different thing altogether. There are groups of mankind which are meant to express something in a collective way. And that is the true reason for truth behind race. So now, of course, we are doing away with racism, which is good, because the surface racism must go away. But there is a truth of racism. Like, for instance, when the group of Sri Aurobindo's devotees sit together and they are talking about a new idea and its expression. So they are different. Whether we like it or not, this is a different group. And when we meet, we have done away with all the surface identities. We don't meet as Americans or Indians or Russian or German or French. But we meet as those who are seeking for a different and a new kind of life. This cannot be blurred and brought together with other groups which are doing a meditative group which is trying to practice spirituality in another way. That's perfectly fine. But there are different groups of mankind, and we have to understand this is a new thing which is beginning. And so there is a lot of right now confusion going on, because as I said, one thing which is going to happen is that spirituality is going to be liberated from all the trappings in which it has been trapped. Those trappings were important because otherwise man could not conceive of it. So we had conceptions of spirituality. Even today, People ask often very odd question. What kind of Vedanta is Sri Aurobindo's Vedanta? Is it same as the Brahman realization of the past? I said, can we just come out of these frames? What is Vedanta to us unless we have realized the truth of Brahman? It's a word. We use it. We can define the word, end of knowledge. We can use the word Brahman. We can describe it. But does it mean anything till I have realized it? And when I realized it, I may well coin my own word. Somebody called it thou. Somebody called it non-existence. Somebody called it beyond existence and non-existence. It doesn't matter. Somebody called it sad. The point is to realize it. So now all these trap of words, conceptions, philosophies, systems, religion, from that it is coming out. And Sri Aurobindo points out this danger. He says what used to happen is when there was a spiritual impulsion to evolve through these subjective spaces, very soon it got crystallized. One classic example in front of my eyes is what happened to the Sikh religion. It started as a wonderful high impulse. Sri Aurobindo speaks of it as Sikh religion and Vedanta is the last finest flowers of Sanatan Dharma. Before, it lost its way, it faced the challenge of the Britishers. So it was really climbing very high. And then it crystallized and precipitated into a form. And then the form became real. The book became real. The real experience and the yoga became subordinate. So much so that now a whole new absurd political system has come out and there is a demand for a Khalistan, which is nothing but a kind of state which is going to be crushed between, if at all, between two nuclear states unless divine uses it as a dagger to go through Pakistan. Well, that's a different story altogether. Divine can use anything and everything. But generally, what happens is that, in religion, Sri Aurobindo says that things tend to again become convention and a symbol. So people often ask, for instance, mother's symbol, Sri Aurobindo's symbol. We see this tendency now, I'm wearing a symbol, it's something so nice. So, but people believe, they start putting stickers in front of the scooter and all kinds of places. Now, this symbol has to be lived with it. If you look at the symbol, what is this symbol? So powerful. Mother is at the center. So when often I speak about the symbol, I say that, well, if you put the mother at the center and not the ego, then you have put at least the central point of the symbol. Then our 4 powers moving us freely. Then the 12 qualities. So the symbol is meaningless unless we recreate it inside us. So it becomes a convention otherwise. So this is where we are heading towards, because mankind has a tendency to crystallize. It doesn't feel comfortable without crystallizing it. And this crystallization is precisely what is to be avoided. Who will avoid it? The individual. Individual will revolt. So there will be individuals who will refuse to follow any convention. At the same time, they are discoverers. They are nomads of that future age when man will no more be mad and he will discover his true status. So they are the nomads of the new world. And that's why Mother said something very interesting. She spoke of what is needed for the new creation. She was simplifying things, that how when we enter this subjective age, what is the most important thing? The most important thing is what is going on deep inside us. And she says that, when she speaks about the supramental world, what it is going to throw away. So she said it will throw away hypocrisy, nothing else. So there will be a transparency, what you are inside, that will be projected outside. This is what we see in today's children, who say, well, I want to make a lot of money. So there was a time when I can speak about the Air Force context, and there used to be psychological testing to see who is ready and who is not ready. So we used to ask, why do you want to join the Air Force? So if somebody said, oh, I want to serve the nation and I would love to die for it, then generally it was considered that he's telling a lie. The lie score is very high. But if he said, it's something which will give me fame, I love to, it's money plus fame. There is something which uniform can provide which is not accessible. And it was like it's probably closer to truth. So this is how now in this new age we see that hypocrisy is dying, because otherwise spirituality gets trapped into these forms which look very nice, very neat, and yet they are not the real thing. They are nothing but conventions. So this is what we see today. On one side, these scaffoldings are being broken. Man, they have served the purpose. On the other side, this new creation has started. Man is exploring his inner stages, steps, inner states, dimensions. Through drugs, he is doing it. Through alternate ways, he is doing it. Even you hear about ways by which you can have the celestial experience by taking a drug. Most dangerous. But why these drugs came into existence was because man wanted to have the experience of the subjective worlds. And when he experienced, they were generally the vital worlds. But what happened? The door got opened. They were, unfortunately, those who sacrificed became martyrs. The drug addicts became martyrs to suddenly break the neat, rational world where the senses, whatever the senses told us was true. When people came back through LSD and started saying, well, I can see sound and I can hear light. How can this kind of fusion, this synthesis take place? That's why we see that, a whole new age understanding of life started. This is not the ultimate. They were ways and means nature used to open a door. And with that came a new education. So this new education in the future is going to be centered around the soul. It will not try to fit the child into a fixed product which a machinery has brought out. So fixed product means the child comes out and he knows, good morning, sir, how are you? Okay, he wears a nice dress and he looks very polished, but the heart is unchanged. So when mother was asked that many of these children I find they are ill-mannered, she says, yes, outwardly you will see that, but you have to look inside what is happening. And there she gave a very interesting formula, and I have seen this in my practice so often when I encounter all kinds of people whom one would normally condemn, pass away because outwardly they don't show things the way we expect. And it's really a horror when people begin to show things which you expect. So earlier, every student tried to look good so that the teacher says very good. Now, students, because there is freedom, they say they don't need to look good. It doesn't mean they are not good. It means they are now on a road to discovering the truth which is going to be far. But we have to guide them. So the whole education has to shift from fitting the child into a fixed mold and help each child guide his own unique approach towards divinity. And then we have to come out of many conventions. The idea of success, which is linked with material success, the jobs and career prospects, which is again linked with how much money you are going to earn and the place you occupy in society. We have to disabuse our minds of all that and allow them the freedom to explore their own nature and live according to their own deepest impulsion of truth in them. What was called as Swadharma. Mother used the word free progress system, which is education guided by the child's soul. Far cry still. Most of the schools are still very far from this. They still teach the old format. Even schools which have Sri Aurobindo's name. So I often say this, that though we have a school in the name of Sri Aurobindo, I'm not talking of here, but I'm talking of, places. I say, but we are teaching Hiranyakaship's gospel. So that's what is it? You should teach Prahlad's gospel because it's a school of the new age. So this is what the change which must come in education. The same in counseling, in therapies, in psychology. We must understand each individual as unique on his unique journey. So this is a big problem with me when people ask about what is this system of integral psychology. I said, if you reduce it to a system, you have finished it. Because once again we'll have a school where integral psychology is taught. Integral psychology by its nature cannot be taught by books. The integral psychologist, if I have to use the word, the therapist must be someone who has discovered his own soul. That is the minimum. And then we go back to that Guru Sishya way. Who was the Guru? Guru was not somebody who was certified that I have a degree in yoga. Guru was somebody who had discovered a great truth. And the Guru guided each one differently. When we look at Sri Aurobindo, yesterday only I was discussing, there was a couple, of course we know, Dilip Kumar Roy and Sahanadi. And they were going through each their own unique difficulty and with each other. That's the interesting part. Now, when they write to Sri Aurobindo, what Sri Aurobindo writes to Sahanadi and what he writes to Dilip Kumar Roy, so different. Each one, he is not sitting on a moral judgment, trying to sort out the quarrel, but he is guiding each according to the law of his own nature. This is something which has to come in psychology and counseling. For example, when people come with suffering. So it's not about status quo, going back, adjust to the world. That's the way of the ego. But it is to use that suffering as a lever to discover oneself and one's own deeper reality. There's a very beautiful hint of this in Mother's prayers and meditation. So when she's, going from the shore, Geneva, and then she has to sail further. So she says, she writes a prayer that people must have suffered a lot, because obviously we can imagine what they must have felt in a presence. We can only imagine. So she says, when I suffered from the suffering of others, to those whom we are attached, then what attitude we should take? She said, on one side it is puerile, and on the other side it is, isn't it the expression of a kind of love and unity that exists between human beings? So she gives us a clue. She says, every time there is an acute suffering that tears you apart, so use this suffering as a lever or a sword, because suffering is something very acute. It concentrates on a point, like an abscess. Go deep inside and discover that space of oneness. And I've seen this oneness, this aspiration is so exists in human beings, it's just to be uncovered. And that's where she says that if only two things are necessary, one is not to cling to the past. This is what we see happening in people. But the other thing is, you must have the thirst for perfection, thirst for progress. She says if these two things are there together, first is the thirst and the second is do not cling. And she says if you have these two things together, then even the extravagances of an American youth are a path. So this is what is the need of modern psychology to uncover. I don't know, we talk so much and we have so many books written, but I am yet to discover a chapter dedicated in a book of even integral psychology. Only on the soul, on divine. Without these, we will not discover the dream of, fraternity, unity, equality. They cannot be discovered. So there is on this side, the individual must disabuse himself or get through these layers of the ego and discover the soul within. And for this, he will be challenged, because the moment you undertake this discovery, the danger is that you may discover the vital being and think this is yourself. So very often, of course, Sri Aurobindo gives the example of Germany, which tried to discover its nation soul and discovers its vital self. This is what is incidentally happening in many of the nations today. Because the nations also must discover the nation soul, and they are encountering their vital self. But they have to go deeper. This is the first stage. So individual also may discover his vital self and think that this is the soul. And that's why many times when we hear these words, I am looking for my soulmate. Is she my soulmate? Is he my soulmate? So I ask them, have you discovered your soul, bro? So, well, no, I haven't. So how can you think about soulmate? It comes later. Discover your soul. It's very interesting. Now the relations are changing. The other day, a youngster, he was telling me that, how he now talks to some of the elders. He says, when you tell them bro, so they suddenly, are nonplussed, because elders are supposed to be respected. You have to use some kind of epithet. And mother was so far looking. In the ashram context, she had removed anything except the name. So a 10-year-old child can call Nalini. We find it, so we use the word da and di. Even this is a concession given to human nature. And again we see this is coming up. I am so happy when somebody just calls me Alok. Yes, that's true. Why there is the need of adding an extra dimension to it? So this is where we begin to discover, we are getting rid of all these molds, and we have to discover the true entity and the soul. The soul has no caste, no religion. It formulates itself through various religion, expresses itself in terms of, this nationality, that caste, this kind of a group mold. It can express, but in itself it is free. And this must be discovered first. This inner freedom. So Sri Aurobindo says this is the first law, and this age will be dedicated to that. I feel this century, maybe a couple of centuries, because in the previous century we saw the finest flower of nature's effort was to create the ego individuality. And over the next 200 years we are going to see it gradually going layer by layer. And this true individuality, the soul individuality, before that, people will identify with their desires and say, "This is me." They will identify with their idea and say, "This is me." But they will go still further and discover the true me. So these are the people who will become the pioneers. So it is going to upset the whole trend. Like, for example, in the ashram context, where mother really set new benchmarks. So how were people chosen for education in the school? They were not chosen based on your degrees. You may have a B.Ed and an M.Ed, it didn't matter. So you were chosen on something which she saw, the possibility inside. So we have to reach that point right now for everything. Now what she saw was the Swadharma. There are people who have that Swadharma, they can be part of education and they can bring out the best in a child. They're equipped for that. And it means also that in our age there is a need for more space, because the second term of the individuality is universality. So this is the another part which we see simultaneously happening. So human beings in their group life are beginning to find different patterns are emerging. Sometimes people get landlocked in a group. That also is happening, and then nature destroys it, or the divine destroys it. So somebody I heard sometime back, very interesting. Sometime people in passing teach you something very nice. So it was I had to ask people, "Are you an ashramite?" It's not a good question to ask, because ashramites can get treatment as an ashram doctor. Of course, fortunately, all this has changed and is changing. It must change into a larger context. It never was there during mother's time. People, devotees came from outside, and they also joined the playground. Many people are not perhaps aware. Now you can't do that. You can't participate in the march past. You have to take a signature and all that. So whatever it is. So I asked this man this odd question which I always felt uncomfortable about asking. And this man tells me something very interesting. He says, "No, I am a motherite." So I said, "Oh wow." He has discovered a new term. He said, "I love the mother, I am a motherite." Now this is how people are going to begin with. You can't close them into any chamber. The fish will grow. And it will outgrow all chambers. So the age of institutions will be over unless they become plastic and wide. So we already have that distance learning, we have the Zoom learning, we have digital schooling. So a whole new world is opening up. In the dimension of health, so from material kind of healing, we have to enter into energy healing. It has started. Just now before giving a talk, I had another webinar, 5:30 to 6:30. So I needed to energize myself. And thanks to Meera, who is here, she gave me Auroville water. And I said, "Is it something like Auroville here?" She said, "No, it is dynamized Auroville water." And I feel the difference. So now you see, what is it? You have charged it with energy. These things which mankind had discarded hastily, but they will come back in a new way. Earlier, to charge a water, that Naga sannyasi cutting through water, through mantra and incantation. Now you can charge it in other ways. Just tell water that I love you, I want you to heal. You are sacred, you are dear. Please heal. And that cup of water, if we give it to an individual, who knows? But you can't do research in all this because there are huge money involved in pharma companies. So, big challenge out there with the but it's possible. The idea, can it really help? It is a new way. At one place when mother was asked that, "Well, if I feel that I am cured, does it mean that it has already been granted?" She says, "Yes, you can take it like that. Otherwise, this faith will not come. That this faith that I am cured, it is a sign, I will be cured, is a sign that at another level you have been cured. The very fact that this faith has sprung up." So new forms of dealing with matter, and it will bring in new dimension of possibility. Imagine people with vital energy can crystallize. They can bilocate themselves. New ways of interchanges, not through the internet, but in their own way. They can communicate long distances. And even now we experience these phenomena. But we don't pay attention because we are living in a straight-jacketed science. Oh, this is not possible. But maybe we'll start discovering it's possible. They'll become more and more frequent. We'll discover our ideas echoed in other minds. So there is a long way. Humanity has already taken that step. And of course, it'll bring in its dangers, because when the powers of the mind begin to control matter, we can imagine what's going to happen. So all this is exciting things are in the waiting. And eventually, who will be the pioneers? Sri Aurobindo says the pioneers will be those who will become indifferent to these outer forms. And they will focus only on the one thing needful. And that thing needful is the spiritual conversion. It doesn't matter what religion, denomination, what language, all these you speak. And the second thing, very interestingly, says, what will be this new sociology? Right now, in our sociology, we label people, we fix them in categories. That means we deny evolution. So somebody is a criminal, is a criminal. One of the first experiences of Sri Aurobindo, not the first, but one of the massive experiences, which in Alipur jail he says, I saw Vasudev even in the darkened bodies, misused bodies and darkened minds. And he says, these are the people I am lifting up. So in every criminal, there is this seed of possibility which is hidden, which has taken a very deformed character. I am happy to say that at least in India, in Pondicherry, Sri Aurobindo Society is indeed engaged in prison talks, and in India there are several places where yoga, the Gita, Vedanta is being taught to the prison inmates, and with wonderful results. Those results are being documented. I don't know whether they are being shared or not. Now it is something which is very interesting, which has come up. That in prison people go and talk to them and they come back humbled. That we thought they are criminals. But each has a wonderful story to tell, and each has within him something very beautiful. So this is new sociology. Now the old and the new one is continuing right now. You still send them to prison. But at least you begin to accept that, well, this prison is not a prison where you are straitjacketing him, punishing him, you are preventing him forcibly by for not committing a crime, you are tying handcuffs to him. No, it's a prison where you are teaching him how to be liberated from his criminal tendencies. So it becomes a kind of ashram where he goes for the moment because he has strong tendencies to harm. So he is kept there, but they should change into not just reformatory, but transformative places. So this will be the sociology. Similarly, when we look at the other extreme, the saint. Saint is again a queer, weird fellow. He is only supposed to just bless, wear a certain dress and, say things which sound very holy. So now, because saints are not going to be like that, in fact, there won't be any saints. There would be supermen, which is a different story altogether. So there again we will see this same tendency where people will not understand. And there will be chaos and confusion. But eventually they will get integrated into the society and they will help mankind to advance. The only work for which these beings will be engaged to discover their spiritual individuality and universality is to engage in the work of the general uplifting of mankind. So this idea that somebody is a evolved person and others are, only they have to follow, this concept is going to go away. And Sri Aurobindo told this in Synthesis of Yoga, even those who are teachers of integral yoga, who are they? He said, he is a child who has gone a little further along, leading other children. He is a brother soul who is helping kindred souls. So that way, that approach that we have of bringing a mystic aura, that's going to go away around these pioneers. They will take it. And Sri Aurobindo himself, you see, if you look at Sri Aurobindo, do we put him in a category of guru? For me, the most beautiful, I'm talking of relationship with human beings. I'm not talking of his achievement, which are super, we cannot speak about it. But as a relationship, he started this wonderful new relationship of being like a friend. You could write to him anything. You could say, I feel like eating rasgullas, what do? I feel like eating crabs and fishes. And he would give a reply, equally humorous. And with the mother, you could play. So they set very many new benchmarks. Why? Because they didn't want that everybody pales in their presence. They could easily. If they showed that aspect, it would have been very different. But they didn't want that. So all these are harbingers of the new age, a new sociology where we'll recognize that man is essentially a spiritual individual. He is essentially divine. Let's not use the word spiritual individual, but divine in his essence. And the task of society is to help in unfolding this divinity. And in return, the task of the individual is not to revolt against society, but to fulfill it by expressing himself best, his own divinity best, through the group life. So, this way, the dream of an individual and collective emancipation will be fulfilled, because it's very easy to be iconoclast, to destroy, revolt, and all that is given to some people. But we have to new create. So, they will create new ways and benchmarks for society to follow. Right now, it will be considered as odd, but slowly they will become new standards. So, the task of the psychologist will be to discover the divine element behind the person who is struggling and suffering, and to bring it out. Not just have a catharsis. For catharsis, we have the eyes. God created eyes. So often I say there are two ways of catharsis. Just few minutes more I'll take. The natural way, they flow through the eyes. The divine way, they vaporize. So you have to apply the divine heat, Agni, so they vaporize. So that's not the psychiatrist's task. It's not to analyze him and childhood trauma and I'm going to heal. All this is old story. Whatever be the childhood trauma, even that, we see them as steps in a great journey. And I have known people. Everything was a step in that incalculable plan. And the purpose is to reconnect him to this deeper plan, this deeper thread, which is running through his life. So also with health, that we have to discover more and more that we can be empowered. Instead of being dependent only on the doctor and prescription, but the healer is within us. So also in education, the task of education is to bring out the best, the divinest, the soul within a child, and to put it, not just teach him meditation and come in contact with God, but to bring out this soul and help him to express his soul movement. His life should become a rhythm of the soul, a song of the soul, a movement of the soul, and not something which conforms to the world. And by doing so, he will best help the world, because world is helped by individuals. And these individuals who discover their own, make their own deepest discoveries, are the ones who will help the world and society to discover its own highest self. They who have discovered the Narayana within will discover the Narayana in the world and help it advance further and further. So this is an endless subject, but just a few seeds here and there. Please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Alok, for this wonderful presentation of the subjective age arriving. And it was a great joy to hear this. We exactly wanted to hear this element of the psychological element of psychic being more kind of demanding its place in our life and society. And your points are really very, very valuable about imprisonment. For example, prisons in Norway, they changed totally already. The imprisoned people can walk daytime in the parks, and in the evening they come home into their nice room with internet, TV, they have free education, and so on. So they are really working on those people who fell off the track.
Yeah.
And also your point on the placebo effect, which is now taken into account as a part of healing, interestingly. They are not discarding it as some kind of fake thing. It's really a kind of looking into seriously in the healing system. And also the points of Aurovillian Ashramite, being Ashramite and being Aurovillian. Mother never did this. To be Aurovillian, what they did today, to be privileged, to be somewhere on the list. There was a very simple idea: to live in Auroville, one must be a willing servitor of the divine consciousness and nothing else. So, but everything has changed and became a kind of gymkhana club. You have to be admitted there by some group of people who will judge whether you fit or not, whether you are good for them or not, which is a very big problem nowadays. And so many more topics which are so relevant. I'm very happy to hear all of your uh, the exploration of these topics. And there are a few questions here for you.
Yes, please. Yes.
I will read them out that others may hear. Thank you for opening our minds, Dr. Pandey. My question: in today's chaotic world that is bombarded with conflicting information from all sides, where should an individual start on his/her journey of self-exploration without escaping from this world?
Wonderful. So, where should an individual start in exploring a journey in this chaotic world bombarded with information? So, what I always say and use in my practice is connect with your aspiration. So, I'll give you just one example to make it clear. So, for example, people often say that, I'll give the context of, let us say, Shri Aurobindo. So, okay, there is this yoga, there is this other yoga, there is a third yoga, and there are various practices, and people talk about them, all this, that, all. So, then sometime when they ask me, I say, see, I understand each has its own beauty and wonder, but it doesn't fit into what I am aspiring for. My aspiration is for world change, right from beginning. I found nirvana, in my humble opinion, it's something very great. Now I understand you pass through the doors of freedom, though in a different way in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. But, this whole idea of an individual salvation which cuts you from the world is meaningless. So when all these, several gurus talking all of this and this path, that path, I said, tell me, what is the goal? What is the end point? If the goal is individual salvation, that's not what I am looking for. My aspiration is something else. And the only one who could come a little close to it was the Gita. That, okay, the Gita at least teaches you to be in the world and yet be free. So to an extent, I said, yes, this is it. But that's not enough because the world remains what it is. So Sri Aurobindo is there completely. So this is, but somebody else may have a very different thing. So I always say the thread of our life is in our deepest aspiration. And this we have to explore. Sometimes it is covered, it comes as flashes. Sometimes in childhood, one may have glimpsed it. Sometimes, while in the face of certain circumstances, like a prayer, it rose from inside. Sometimes while looking at a landscape, like in case of Nishtha, that I wish God could enjoy this beauty is what? Is that Ananda in the material world, she wants it at a human level. So it may take different forms and it should take different forms. And that aspiration is the thread. Then the rest follows. Which sea or river or stream of information and jnana, I put it like this, information which will lead me, information is like a little paper boat which takes me to a bigger stream, and then that stream is more of like what we call as tinsels of knowledge. Then we have to change it at another port and enter into the vaster river of wisdom, and the wisdom itself will lead us to the vastest of all its source, which is the divine. So then we can see that which trail I want to follow. So connect with the aspiration. And that is something individual. Each one has to look inside and feel for oneself.
Thank you. There is another question, very clearly explained our way of life in ashram. I get a question from people. How is it for modern rationalist, scientific and atheist mindset in the spiritual transformation, how it is for them?
Yeah, it's very simple. In fact, Sri Aurobindo and the mother themselves said how an atheist or somebody who doesn't believe in anything can still, arrive at this transformation, because atheism and theism relate to conceptions of God. You don't need a conception of God. You may still have an aspiration. The problem is not with theism and atheism. The problem is if you don't have an aspiration, this is a dangerous state. We may be very religious, a theist, so to say, and yet have no aspiration. We are very happy in our comfort zone. That is a dangerous situation. But if we wish that this world becomes a beautiful place, I am into Sri Aurobindo's yoga whether I like it or not. If I have this aspiration that may I discover the source of all knowledge, true wisdom. Even a scientist may be exploring truth. So it's perfectly valid. But of course, we must know we should not stop at halfway homes. That's the only thing required. If I am looking for truth, shouldn't stop with material truths and declare all else is not there. No seeker of truth will do that. I must go further. If I am a non believer in any kind of system, religion, God, perfectly fine. But if I am a seeker, I'll not stop at any halfway home. So if we don't stop at any halfway home, and if I am seeking, and now that seeking will take different forms. In the religious minded, the seeking takes the form of a personal God. In the intellectually minded, rational minded, the seeking takes a more impersonal form. The one is seeks for truth. So scientists seek for truth. Only unfortunate thing is they stop at matter. They somehow have this idea, now they are breaking free from this. The best scientists are breaking free. Not yet the mainstream science, but the best scientists are breaking free from this idea that matter is God. I mean, to say that material laws are the final law. Science itself has led us to that point. There are no unchangeable fixed laws. They are patterns of energy. So we have reached that point where science has entered into its own scientific, the subjective space of objectivity. It has entered without whether knowing it or not. It has to handle it. So keep the quest for truth, for love, for light, for freedom, for example. Some people say we want freedom. I don't care whether God exists or not. I said, fairly fine. But what kind of, let's explore how we can really discover our freedom. How to be truly free. Are we really free? If I am just having certain ideas and opinions and I live by that, am I really free? So step by step, we have to help ourselves discover. If we don't stop any halfway thing, if our seeking is genuine, doesn't matter, path or no path, we will arrive. We will be picked up for the new creation at some point.
Thank you. There is one more question here. As a holistic therapist following your suggestions here, I wondered if you have suggestions how to phrase this new way with potential clients instead of focus on the suffering.
This is a good question, and I would suggest don't phrase any way because, let it flow from an inner intuition. So, the therapist in this field must open more and more to his inner intuition, wherein he begins to identify with something deeper in the client, not with his pain and sorrow and suffering, because that's possible through yoga. But I have seen that if you become a witness and you let your intuition take hold, the words that the person says, the suffering that he expresses, becomes a tool to enter inside. Any communication for that matter, all communication becomes a bridge. And using that bridge, like Sri Aurobindo and the mother, sometimes they would see a picture. It becomes a bridge. So when it becomes a bridge, the focus is not on what the person is saying, but you go deep inside the person using that bridge, and then you click with something where the entire journey of the individual and his possible future, the path he should take, begins to unfold. Now, this is something very intuitive, and I've seen so many experiences where it works perfectly, and the individuals ask, how did you know it? Now, I can't put a system to it because in different people it will be different things. It can't be the standard format. So best is not to use any fixed format that this is a new way or something. But if we want to put it, it is like we are entering into an age of intuition. That's what we can say. One more thing about the rational. So since we are talking about the intuition. So for example, once person belonging to a party which was claimed to be rationalist, he brought his son for treatment, and in Pondicherry, and then he knew that I am a devotee of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and he told me, sir, I have heard a lot about you. Will you please treat him? A very rich man, very powerful, politically connected person. So I said, okay, no problem. So he said, but sir, only one request, please don't tell him about God. So I said, what is the problem? He said, no, because we are rationalists. So I said, doesn't matter, I'll tell him rationally about God. I didn't know that this is their party agenda. So in their party agenda, rationalism is equivalent to no God. Rationalism is equivalent to don't explore anything beyond matter. Now this is dangerous. This is being stuck. So there are two kinds of rationality. One is reason itself leads us to the doorway of intuition. And there is another where rationality shuts us into a formula just like religion shuts us. So to be liberated, the aspiration comes in. I want to go beyond. Am I satisfied with the neat world that reason has created? All its walls, all its formats. If yes, then there is no point to talk about transformation. So I said, okay, you stay with your party, I'll prescribe the medications. Because that's the only way. And then to just add that how much it stifles human beings. So one day I used to tell him, the boy, that I want to see your mother because I want to know the story. So one day the mother came. She was so frightened. See, wife of a very powerful man. She was so frightened. I said, why? What is the situation? She said, sir, I want to pray in my house. I want to, offer a mala. I can't do that. Because if I do that, my husband will be very angry and shout at me. So you can imagine to what absurd extent things can go. So I was so touched. I said, okay, you quietly go and sit in the ashram for some time. I'm sure he won't reach you there. But this stifles this urge. So if we are satisfied within the frames of life that reason and religion gives, then obviously we are still in the conventional age. We are not ready for the higher. And we should not force people. So there is no forced conversion. But we can certainly, by our life, give an example that there is something greater, something deeper. And at some point of time, they may suddenly feel like exploring that, what is it? And then the door opens. Yeah. It's intuition. If you want to put it, I don't know, intuition defies systems. So by its definition. But you can bring it into system. But the problem of systematizing it, it becomes another religion. And that's what has happened to religions, and we should not do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Actually, it reminded me how people from Auroville approached the mother and asked her, can you give us some rules and regulations how we could accept people to Auroville?
Yeah.
And she said, as long as there are no rules and regulations, there is still a hope for Auroville. So there has to be that inner recognition of the truth.
Yeah, inner recognition. That's what is important.
So thank you very much for this wonderful feast of knowledge and devotion. And we are very happy to have you with us every time. So we continue our journey and meet with you again. Thank you, Alok.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alok.
Thank you so much.
Gratitude.
Yes.
Namaste.
Gratitude. Namaste.